to Ask the Patient Advocate podcast, where we will discuss all things related to navigating your health. I am Dr. Elena Borrelli, and I'm so excited to talk about such an important topic of private patient advocacy. Managing your health and navigating the healthcare system is challenging, but it's a lot better when we go through it together. Welcome back to a new episode of Ask the Patient Advocate podcast. Today, I am so honored to be joined by Alison Tierney, a registered dietitian and board-certified specialist in oncology nutrition. Alison not only works professionally to support patients through evidence-based nutrition, but she has also lived through her own cancer journey and brings that unique perspective of both a provider and a patient. So welcome, Alison. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Of course. So your story is so powerful. Can you start by telling us a little bit about your personal health journey, including infertility, PCOS, and later breast cancer? How has that shaped the way that you approach nutrition and patient care today? That's kind of a lot of questions in one, but just give us a little bit.
Yeah, oh my goodness. I feel like when I think about like my health journey in the last, decade and a half or so, there's quite a bit into it, but I will try to keep it as short as possible, but make sure we understand like where it all started. So anyways, when I was younger, just starting to menstruate and so forth in high school, I was pretty immediately diagnosed with PCOS because of irregular periods, etc. And so that kind of just continued on. I was put on birth control for control. And then fast forward a few years, my husband and I were ready to try to start having a family, came off birth control and started having even more symptoms with my PCOS, essentially because of how the birth control can just also mask the issues. And I knew that I had PCOS. I didn't think that I would have issues with infertility, but I did. And my whole family, in terms of the females in our family, have all had issues in some particular way. So it's definitely genetic, hereditary. We all kind of carry that. And so anyways, where my journey of nutrition and everything actually started, I always say that it started as an athlete because I was super interested in sports performance. Because I was an athlete, I wanted to know how to naturally improve my athletic performance. I played all the way through college. And when I was in college playing, it actually started to shift into oncology. Nutrition was really, truly my interest. And that is because of several cancer diagnoses within my family that occurred during that time. And so that's where my whole idea of, okay, sports performance is great, but let's look at longevity and lifespan and health span and all those things. And so I started to become really interested in that. And I was not going to school to be a dietitian at the time. I was a business major. I ended up graduating with my business degree and trying to figure out what I was going to do next. And my now husband, boyfriend at the time, was a very powerful advocate for me to go back to school to be a dietitian. And he kept saying, like, this is what you love. Like, you're always researching it. You're always learning about it. And so I looked into going back to school and dietetic school. And so as soon as I learned more about it, I'm like, this is what I'm doing. And I want to be an oncology dietitian. So although I was open to other ideas, I wanted to be in oncology truly because of how it had impacted my family for generations. And I wanted to know how nutrition could play a role in to help reduce the risk of developing cancer. How could it help them during the course of treatment? And also, how could it help them in survivorship to reduce the risk of recurrence? So I often say that I wouldn't be standing before you talking about this if we didn't find out that, yes, of course, nutrition plays a role in all aspects of that.
Of course.
So I ended up becoming an oncology dietitian, got my dream job right out of college, and was working in outpatient cancer. And from that period of time, my husband was working a lot. This was pre-kids. And I started doing a lot more research on my own of nutrition. I wanted to see how I could best help my patients that were going through cancer. And I kind of stumbled on the predominant plant-based nutrition approach. And we learned a little bit about it in dietetic school, but not a lot. And so I started diving into it more, and really this emphasis of phytonutrients and anti-inflammatory and all the really great pieces that I started to adopt this plant-based approach for my patients, but also for myself. And where this all kind of intersects and crosses is where I go back to my husband and I trying to conceive for the first time, having a lot of difficulty. And before we decided to move on to more intense fertility treatment, I said, you know what? I've done my research. It's safe. It's healthy. It might improve my PCOS. I want to try this whole plant-based diet thing. And my husband said, let's do it if you think it's going to help. And long story short, there is that with although I had been slowly reducing meat and dairy from my diet, once I went officially plant-based to kind of go all in, is when I got pregnant 3 weeks later. Like I ovulated for the first time 3 weeks later, got pregnant, had a beautiful baby girl. And long story short, I have two beautiful little girls. And then intersects later is when I was postpartum, 14 months or so, 10 days after breastfeeding my youngest child. Once I finished that, so I went to an annual exam with my OBGYN and we found a lump. And first, we didn't really do anything about it because I had just finished breastfeeding and all the different changes that can happen during that. We just kind of chalked it up to breastfeeding. And this is where I didn't do anything at the time, but I was preparing for a presentation as a breast cancer speaker at a conference and came across more information about breast cancer after pregnancy and nursing. And although rare, obviously can happen.
Yeah.
And I came across, I kept feeling that lump when I was at home. And I reached back out to my OBGYN. And this was, I think it was early April was when I had the annual exam. This was like towards the end of April, early May, that I reached back out and said, I just don't feel comfortable with this. I feel really anxious. Every time I touch the lump, I feel really anxious. And I think I just want some peace of mind. And at this time, my mom was already a breast cancer survivor. My grandmother was a breast cancer survivor. My godmother was a breast cancer survivor. My other grandmother had passed away from lung cancer. My grandfather of liver cancer. So it was really, and of course, I'm working in oncology. It's very deep in my mind. And so anyways, she schedules me and says, absolutely, let's get you an ultrasound. And that ultrasound led straight to a mammogram, led straight to a biopsy, which led to the diagnosis of breast cancer.
Oh boy.
Yeah. And so it all kind of gets intersected there and so forth. And I think something that's really, important for your audience to hear as well is my OBGYN who originally found the lump, but we didn't do anything about it. She even sent a letter or a card in the mail to me after my diagnosis and said how grateful she was that I reached back out to say something doesn't feel
Yeah,
right. Something,
absolutely.
right?
Self-advocacy is so important. I 100% agree.
Exactly. And so my husband and I were talking about, and even my mom, who's a breast survivor, said most people would have not reached back out. They would have waited the whole next year. And what would that have been? So we can go in a little bit more into my cancer journey if you want. But anyways, I had about a year of treatment, 3 different surgeries. And although I'm very blessed and grateful to be able to say to you today that I am considered in remission and doing really quite well.
That is amazing, and amazing that you did that, because I think there's so many reasons that we've, covered in other talks and stuff, but a lot of times patients feel like, well, my provider knows best. I shouldn't be like insulting them by asking them questions, which should never really be the case, but it's a very common feeling that people experience, especially because the medical field and like is in healthcare is very intimidating. There's so much information that people don't feel like they know, and they often don't know because it's its own big specialty. And so it's, they may think, a lot of times patients feel like, well, it doesn't seem right to me, but that's probably because I don't understand it. So it kind of gives them that a barrier to actually advocating for themselves like they should. So
Yeah. One thing that I kind of stand by on that is also that I tell people when they come to me a lot and they're concerned about something, and I say, in this situation, it is guilty until proven innocent, right? So if there's something you are concerned about it, bring it up to your doctor. If your doctor doesn't address it and you're still concerned about it, you need to find another doctor, right? For
100%.
another
Yes.
advocate, and
Exactly.
I have a very great relationship with my OBGYN, and I don't blame her for any of it, but in her card, she said, thank you for teaching me that even if I'm not 100% certain, to continue to get answers, right?
Absolutely.
And so, yeah, and I feel grateful that I had that experience, that my physician was so open to it. But unfortunately, that is not the case for most people.
You're absolutely right. It is challenging. And, I always tell patients, like, if your provider seems like offended by mentioning, asking questions or asking for a different opinion or a different test, then maybe that's not the provider for you. Because you want someone that you can have an open, trusting conversation with, and that you can actually share, your feelings and your concerns. If you're scared to ask a question, then that's not really going to help you in the short term, or for sure not in the long run. So it's definitely okay. Fortunately, especially in America, we have that ability to change providers, and we have a lot of autonomy that we can use. And so I think it's important to remember that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you mentioned that mindset and lifestyle changes are just as important as nutrition. For many of our listeners going through cancer or supporting a loved one, what role does nutrition actually play during cancer treatment? And I love this question because I am very pro nutrition, and I bring this up a lot, but there's been so many situations where I've had clients that we bring up nutrition to like an oncologist, and they're like, "Oh, it doesn't matter." And I'm like, "Don't do that." Like, it matters. Like, it really bothers me when that's brushed off, because if they're not specialized in nutrition, which obviously they're very, have their own area of specialization, thankfully, but they should say, talk to a nutritionist and get more information or something. It's like, I don't like that. That's just so undervalued, so often. So
You just like speaking from my, my soapbox here and so forth. And so I always tell people, yeah, I'm a dietitian. I am a nutrition nerd. I am obsessed with nutrition, and I'm totally geek out about it. But I will also say that yes, nutrition is important, but it is not the only thing, right? And I think sometimes we, silo these different things thinking that, okay, it's the diet or it's the exercise or it's this, and it's not. It's so many, right? And so
very multifactorial for sure.
absolutely. And so it really has a lot to do with the whole person health. So I always like to say that. So of course, when I'm talking about nutrition, it's not because I'm ignoring these other areas. They're just as important. And in fact, I would say that because of where my nutrition was prior to diagnosis, and yes, I've changed some things and altered some things as a result. And since then, some of my biggest things that I've changed in my life are mental and emotional and like stress related from pre-diagnosis to now. So, but to touch on where the benefits of nutrition are when it comes to cancer. So we know that having a plant predominant or a diet that is just full of whole plant-based foods, fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes. And I'm not saying necessarily vegan or vegetarian, just lots and lots of whole plants in the diet.
Sure.
Is one of the best things we can do to help reduce our risk of not only cancer, but so many other different types of chronic illnesses. And with that being said, it can reduce our risk of developing cancer, but during the course of treatment, it actually can do so many things for supporting our health, such as reducing side effects, helping to reduce any further spread of the cancer cells. Research has shown this. Also, from the standpoint of really truly reducing infection risk, improving our quality of life, all these things that are so incredibly important during the course of cancer treatment. And during the course of treatment, how I commonly work with my patients is truly just that: reducing side effects, improving quality of life. And of course, we want to load them with all these cancer fighting properties, which sometimes are one in the same, but not always, right? So depending on someone's side effects, we might adjust their nutrition accordingly to improve their side effects, especially like, for example, if they're having diarrhea. We're not going to load up the cruciferous vegetables at that time, right? But we're going to try to make sure that we're doing the right foods to calm that down and get them. But also at the same time, having this really great nutrition dense diet can actually really help reduce some of those side effects from happening in the first place. So that's one of the great ways. And then of course, to help maintain our weight, improve our lean body mass. Those are really important things during cancer treatment to focus on, especially protecting our lean body mass, because the lower our body mass is, or the more loss that we have when it comes to muscle mass, the increased toxicity from cancer treatment we can have. So we want to do everything in our power to preserve that lean body mass, and nutrition is one of those avenues. Of course, exercise as well too. And then I think one thing that a lot of people forget about is that nutrition isn't just about the fiber and the phytochemicals. It's a lot about quality of life. I was diagnosed when I had a 14-month-old daughter and I had a 4-year-old daughter. my quality of life just for everybody, but my quality of life was so important to me so that I could be the parent that I wanted to be during that time. And it wasn't perfect. I had hard days, but I really believe that my nutrition and lifestyle played a powerful role in helping me to be able to be, you know, a present parent as much as possible as I was going through that.
No, that's amazing. I think those are all very important points that you brought up. So a lot of people wonder, if someone has a genetic predisposition to cancer, does nutrition and lifestyle really matter? Like, are they just doomed and it doesn't matter? What do you think? Or what would you say to them?
Oh, absolutely not. You're not destined to it. I can speak to that. And I feel like, so I do have a genetic mutation that was discovered after my diagnosis. And so my mutation does increase my risk for breast, colon, kidney, thyroid cancer, and prostate in men. And so what's so hard about that is there's a very popular quote that says that genes or genetics loads the gun and lifestyle pulls the trigger.
I love
And
it.
meaning that really, truly, yes, we might be at higher risk of developing, but it does not mean that someone is going to get the disease or going to develop it. And so really what we can do with nutrition and lifestyle, even if we have a genetic predisposition to it, is truly we can take control of the controllables, which is my biggest thing, control the controllables, right? I
Yes.
can't control my genes. I cannot control that I have this genetic mutation that increases my risk of cancer. But what I can do is I can control what I eat, how much I eat, how I exercise, how I sleep, how I improve and manage stress, all of these things that do play a role and has been shown by research to reduce our risk of developing cancer. But not only cancer, heart disease, diabetes. A lot of times we say that, certain diseases run in the family, and there is definitely genetic components to lots of conditions and diseases. But the other thing that is also genetic is lifestyle, right? We most often carry and hold on to the lifestyle and the diet that we grew up with and for generations and generations, right? So those are things are controllable that are often genetic as well. So absolutely not, just because someone has a genetic predisposition does not mean that they will get the disease. And also, one of the things that my oncologist actually told me when we understood and found my genetic mutation, which actually made a lot more sense in the family because everybody else got tested and found that it was pretty rampant, unfortunately. He said, those that have a genetic predisposition from cancer, although they might be more likely to get cancer, they are less likely to die from cancer. And that has a lot to do with screenings and staying on top of things, and knowledge is power.
I agree. Knowledge is definitely power. So, very well said. So, you've said before that cancer becomes your teacher. That's such a profound way of looking at something so devastating. Explain a little bit what you mean by that.
Yeah, so that goes deep, but I will try to make sure that I get the point across pretty simply. And that is when someone's first diagnosed with cancer, I think that would be a really hard thing to hear, in that cancer can be your teacher. And because there doesn't always have to be a silver lining of everything and all those types of things. But what I mean by that, and what it has meant for me truly, is kind of goes back to a little bit of the things that I learned through my cancer diagnosis. And that relates back to my mental health, my emotional health, establishing boundaries, these things that I didn't really do a good job of before cancer. And so what cancer has taught me is it's taught me how to advocate for myself even more, how to make sure that I'm taking care of myself. And with that being said, I'm a mother. I know a lot of people are parents out there and so forth, and it's so easy for other people's needs to go in front of our own, right? But cancer has taught me just how important it truly is for me to take care of my health so that I can better take care of the people around me. And so cancer has taught me a lot. It has taught me about what I really enjoy in life and what's really important to me and what's not. And I often think that too, that cancer taught me that the things that we used to think are mundane and really just kind of boring, when you're at risk of losing them completely, like changing my daughter's diaper. I couldn't change her diaper for like 10 weeks because I couldn't lift her for 15 weeks, right? The things that you didn't think that you would miss, the ability to do, right, are those mundane things. When you realize how important they actually are to you, that is a way that cancer can be your teacher. And so I encourage anybody that is going through cancer or a chronic illness or anything like that to really zoom out and be able to look at these different aspects of your life and seeing where you can say yes to certain things and no to other things that can really truly improve your health, mental, emotional, spiritual, physical, all the things, and that of those that are closest to you, your family, your friends. And I would say that's probably one of the biggest things that cancer has taught me is what's important in life to me and what's not, and how to try to let go of the things that, even though I would have maybe said yes to all these things beforehand, I can say no to because I know they don't serve my energy and my peace from that standpoint.
That's such an amazing mindset to have. Such inspirational and great advice. And you've been through so much, so that's amazing that you were able to pull all that from those experiences. So for listeners that might feel overwhelmed by their diagnosis or treatment, what's one practical first step they could take with their nutrition or lifestyle that can make a difference, or what would you say?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it can be all incredibly overwhelming. And I think pick one piece to start with, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be a complete overhaul. I know some people that can, they might get diagnosed and snap their fingers and overnight they have overhauled, but that's not the most common. That's not how I did it. That's not how I changed my diet and lifestyle, but picking something small to work on and working on it until it becomes just a natural integration into your life, and then focusing on the next. And more specifically, when it comes to nutrition, I always like to provide the recommendation of focus on adding before subtracting, right? So sometimes we think about the things that, oh my gosh, I can never eat this again, or whatever it might be. Try not to worry about that right away by any means, and really just focus on, okay, where can I add dark leafy greens? Where can I add cruciferous vegetables? Can I try a new food that I haven't tried before? And focus on, okay, I'm going to add these things before subtracting. And, if you're starting to add more things, likely you're going to crowd out some of those other things that we might not want so much in the diet.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like adding, and I think it is important that you said that, because I think a lot of people think like when they hear nutrition, they think they're going to like have to like not eat anything and eat like lettuce and be hungry all the time.
I know, right? I mean, I always tell people if I had to live on fruits and vegetables alone, I would be a very hangry person, right? Like, but I think that goes straight to, if we're thinking about eating healthy, we're thinking about eating like a rabbit, just greens. And
Yeah,
it's like, there's so much more to it. And that's what I love to teach people is like, healthy food can be delicious and nutritious. We just might have to reteach you how to make some things because you've been eating one way your entire life. And it's kind of like riding a bike. Like once you get it, but it does take a little bit of time to figure out that learning curve.
sure. That makes so much sense. So I'm sure our listeners would love to know more about you and are curious about how they can connect with you. Where can people find more information out about you and the work that you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. The best place to find the work that I'm doing in myself is at my website, which is wholesomellc.com. I am not very active really at all on social media on purpose and in intention, but I do have an account on Instagram that's wholesome.cancer.nutrition. You can find a lot of my work there. I'm not active there anymore, but I do have tons of posts and information there. And I have stepped away from intentionally being on there regularly to really focus on my patients. But so therefore, the best place to reach me is my website, wholesomellc.com.
That's amazing. That's wonderful. Alison, thank you so much for joining me today. Your story and your work are such a powerful reminder that while we may not always choose our circumstances, we can choose how we respond to them with knowledge, empowerment, and hope. So thank you so much, and I really appreciate it. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you so much for having me.
If you have a question for Ask the Patient Advocate, email advocate@pathwaypa.com. Managing your health and navigating the healthcare system is challenging, but it's a lot better when we go through it together.